Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron here. I hope you're having a great day or night in Jesus. Thank you so much for watching. We're looking today at the NASB, the New American Standard Bible, and Archaic words combined in there, used in there. And this comes from Archaic Words and the Authorized Version by Lawrence Vance, a prolific researcher. His Vance Publications has a host of out-of-print rare books that he reprints for you, ships them to you free, used to anyhow. The books cost, but the shipping is free. And he's also written a great book on the NASB called Double Jeopardy, which I noticed reading a book by Bruce Metzger one time. Bruce Metzger quotes him as an authority on the New American Standard Bible, which was interesting. So what we're looking at is archaic words in the NASB. We're going to go through some of them, and in some cases actually look at the King James word. I would do that in every case. It's just for the sake of time and tediousness. I'm not. So let's get started. Thanks for being here. Check out our other videos. Join us daily. So in the NASB, does it have archaic words? Because we hear all the time that the King James needs to be updated because it has archaic words. And I've done videos showing the ease of use of the King James. But let's get started. So the NASB uses the word abashed. In Isaiah 24:23, the King James would use confounded. Adjudicates is a New American Standard word. Isaiah 29:21, reproveth in the King James. Adjuration, not adoration, adjuration, Leviticus 5:1, that's swearing in the King James. Allays, not a potato chip. Ecclesiastes 10:4, that is pacifieth in the King James. Amulets in Isaiah 3:20 in the NASB is earrings in the Authorized Version. I would say that most people know what that is more than amulets. Antimony in 1 Chronicles 29:2 is glistering in the King James. Armlets in Numbers 31:50 are chains in the King James. Now just going through some other words is befits, benumbed, bereft, brazier, breakers for waves, bristly for rough, citadel for palace, citron, this is all NASB words, citron, conciliate for entreat, dappled, that's an NASB word for gristled, despoil, devastators, dissipation in Ephesians 5:18 for excess, dusky, that's the NASB words, enigmas, epics, expropriations for exactions in Ezekiel 45:9. All of these expropriations is a NASB word. Filigree, instead of enclosing in the King James, flitting instead of wondering, forlorn, frontals, furrow, garner instead of gathered in the King James, gashing, gaunt, as in John of Gaunt, glisten instead of shine in the King James, glisten in the NASB, glutted instead of full, Ezekiel 39:19, that is me currently. Goyim, Goiim, instead of nations in Genesis 14:1. Harrow instead of break the clods in the King James. Hupo, ibex, imbibe instead of drink in Song of Solomon 5:1. Importune instead of make sure, Proverbs 6:3. Imprecation instead of curse in Jeremiah 42:18. Inaugurated instead of dedicated, Hebrews 9:18. Indolence instead of much slothfulness in Ecclesiastes 10:18. Insolence instead of pride. Insubordination instead of stubbornness. Interposed, NASB, instead of confirmed. Inundate NASB in Job 12:15 instead of overturn, jettison instead of lightened, keener in Habakkuk 1:8 instead of more fierce, cores, K-O-R-S, like Michael Kors, instead of measures, lapis lazuli instead of sapphire, libations instead of drink offerings, licentiousness in Jude 4. It's all NASB words. Loath instead of rejected, mantelet instead of defense, meted instead of weighed, mottled in Genesis 31:10, Negev instead of south, Genesis 12:9, Nephilim instead of giants in Genesis 6:4, nursling, Deuteronomy 32:25, obelisk instead of images, obliterate instead of destroy, parapet, Deuteronomy 22:8, phylacteries, pinions, porphyry instead of red, portico instead of porch, prefects instead of governors, prickling instead of pricking, P-R-O-W, pugnacious instead of striker, putrefaction instead of stink, pyre, P-Y-R-E instead of pile, resounded instead of rang again, resplendent instead of glorious, retinue instead of company. This is all NASB, making it more difficult. Rostrum instead of throne, ruffians instead of the ungodly, sage instead of wise, satiated instead of filled, satraps instead of princes, self-abasement instead of humility. And by the way, that's problematic translation as well. Sickliness instead of grief, siege works instead of forts, smelt instead of purge in Isaiah 125. NASB uses swarthy instead of black, teeming instead of creeping, tendrils instead of branches, teraphim instead of images, terebinth instead of elms, throng instead of people, tinkling instead of sound, tresses instead of galleries, trigon in Daniel 3:5, turbid in Job 6:16 instead of blackish, varicolored, all one, V-A-R-I-C-O-L-O-R-E-D, instead of many colors, Genesis 37:2, vestibule instead of porch in Judges 3:23, vesture instead of garment, vexation instead of grief, virility instead of strength, votive instead of vow in Leviticus 23:38, wadi instead of valley, wadis plural instead of brooks, wield instead of move in Deuteronomy 23:25, wrangle instead of strive, and wretches instead of wicked men. So I think you would agree that in almost every instance that we just used, that the NASB doesn't remove archaic language, and many times makes it more difficult to understand. And this is just a few. This is not the entire list. So it kind of, when people say, well, we need new Bible translations to make them easier to read, they missed opportunities, especially compared with King James. So God bless you. Do your study. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.